Thank you very much. And Ranking Member Scott, it's always great to have you at this committee as well. You're recognized for your opening testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member McGovern, members of the Rules Committee. Yes, to speak in opposition to H.R. 3941. It is frustrating that we're taking up yet another proposal that, among other things, purports to improve school safety, but does nothing to address learning loss, gun violence in schools, or improve students' mental health. In fact, so far this Congress, the House Republicans' priorities for K-12 education have focused entirely on culture wars. First, they passed legislation that will facilitate banning of books. Then the House advanced a bill seeking to bar trans students from participating in sports activities. House Republicans are currently working on a budget that will make devastating cuts to federal education funding. Now the House is considering a second proposal that threatens to strip funding from schools if they use any of their facilities to temporarily house asylum seekers or undocumented immigrants in an emergency. The first, as the ranking member pointed out, was a resolution that didn't do anything. This bill actually does have the potential of taking away school funding. Now, Republicans have falsely implied that temporarily using school facilities to provide shelter diverts school resources from students already impacted by learning loss. Yet, no evidence has been presented to support the claim, and there's no requirement that any school funds be used before federal funds are withheld under the bill. Now, addressing learning loss and helping students make up for lost time in school required us to make historic investments in the school's ability to offer after-school, summer, and mentorship programs to make up for learning loss. The congressional Democrats did just that last Congress through the passage of the American Rescue Plan Act. Yet, in this bill, Republicans seek to take away funding from public schools. And we can't continue to meaningfully address learning loss and meet students' mental health needs if all we're talking about is taking federal funds away from schools and institutions of higher learning that are not aligned with the Republican extreme agenda. Republicans claim this bill is about school safety, but you have to note that this bill takes away funding if schools are used to temporarily house undocumented immigrants. Now, there's no prohibition against permanently housing undocumented immigrants or housing them anywhere outside of an emergency. No prohibition on that. No prohibition against using schools to house defendants awaiting trial. No prohibition against using schools to house those on work release. Only prohibits shelter during a specified emergency unless it's a disaster. Now, this bill does not require using public school money for housing. If they were housed, federal funds are withheld. Now, this bill will, however, give some members the opportunity to disparage immigrants or criticize immigration policy, which I will note is not within the jurisdiction of the Education and Workforce Committee. I remind my colleagues again that we cannot protect student safety without addressing gun violence. And the reality is that Republicans have done nothing to address gun violence, which we know poses the greatest threat to our children's safety. And as I've repeatedly said, any conversation about school safety that does not meaningfully address gun violence is not a serious conversation. If my colleagues want to address learning loss, we should be talking about evidence-based strategies that meet the needs of our students. In fact, thankfully, staff has brought to my attention that next week we will finally have our first committee hearing dedicated to learning loss. But if my colleagues want to keep students safe, we should be confronting what is actually killing them. Parents, teachers, and students are demanding that we take up meaningful action to address gun violence, and yet my Republican colleagues refuse to budge on that issue. H.R. 3941 does not address the real issues confronting our students today, that is, ending gun violence and helping address learning loss. And it threatens to take funds away from public schools and institutions of higher learning, and therefore strongly urge my colleagues to oppose the bill. Yield back.
Thank you very much.